Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to industrial Britain, where the streets are thick with fog, the air is flavored with coal, and bathing is less of a habit and more of a quarterly event. You're about to become a proud, soot-dusted citizen of the 19th century, and spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in a city that's alive with a kind of persistent, low-grade filth, an atmospheric soup of smoke, soot, and damp fog that somehow manages to crawl under your collar and settle behind your ears. The sky is a grim, yellowish smear overhead, the color of weak tea left out too long. You take your first breath and immediately regret it, as it tastes like a combination of scorched toast and public bathwater that's seen better decades. Everything is coated in a layer of coal dust, so fine it crunches between your teeth when you breathe through your mouth, which, unfortunately, is often. Your eyes sting, and not from emotion, it's just the air. The buildings rise around you, towering brick beasts stained black from generations of chimney spew, their windows streaked with the kind of grime that doesn't come off, just politely relocates. Children dart through alleyways barefoot, their faces smudged, hair wind-whipped and flecked with soot, laughing with the kind of energy only people who've never seen a toothbrush can summon. Somewhere nearby, a factory hisses and clanks with mechanical rhythm, spitting smoke into the sky like it's in competition with the neighboring chimneys. You glance down at your clothes, wool, of course, itchy and damp, and note that even freshly laundered, they smell faintly of mildew and desperation. You are for better or worse home. Your boots squelch into cobblestones made slick with something that might be water, but is more likely a mysterious urban stew. A cocktail of horse dung, coal tar, and the occasional puddle of soap runoff from the public washhouse 2 blocks down. There's no real clean here, only varying shades of less filthy. And that's the dream, isn't it? Clean enough not to be noticed. A young boy brushes past you carrying a basket of coal and sneezes directly into his elbow. A rare victory for etiquette. But it does little to stop the spray of soot-dusted mist that floats directly into your personal space. Somewhere in the distance, a bell chimes, but it's quickly swallowed by the mechanical din of 1,000 machines and the cough of 1,000 lungs, all working overtime to process the same dirty air. There's a smell that hovers in the city like an unwanted house guest, faintly metallic, heavily industrial, and laced with the kind of human odors that suggest not everyone made it to wash day this week. You pass a row of tightly packed tenements, and the scent of boiled cabbage wafts from a cracked window, mingling unpleasantly with the sharper tang of unwashed feet in yesterday's lard. It's comforting in its own strange, stomach-churning way. You catch a glimpse of a woman beating a rug outside, sending up a visible cloud of dust that immediately sticks to the sweat on your upper lip. This is the first of many small betrayals your face will experience today. Now and then, you catch sight of a shopkeeper half-heartedly scrubbing the steps outside their storefront with a bristle broom and a bucket of gray water. The results are minimal, but the ritual is more symbolic than effective, an offering to the gods of sanitation, who, by all appearances, are either absent or incredibly sarcastic. As you walk, the sound of your own footsteps mixes with the ever-present background noise of coughing. Short coughs, long coughs, the kind of wet rattle that suggests someone is trying to clear their entire soul from their lungs. The industrial smog isn't just unpleasant, it's actively plotting against you. Historians still debate just how much this omnipresent pollution contributed to the rising rates of respiratory illness. Though most agree it didn't help that everything people burn indoors to stay warm was basically slow-motion lung sabotage. The sun does try to shine through, occasionally, but it's a losing battle. You look up and squint, trying to locate it behind the thick curtain of airborne misery. There it is, a pale disk like a sickly coin floating in dirty water, offering no warmth, just the vague promise of daylight. Your nose starts to itch, and you rub it on your sleeve, only to find the sleeve has its own ideas about what constitutes clean. Now your face smells like wet wool and something vaguely meaty. Excellent. Everywhere you go, the smell of soap clings, but not the good kind. This is industrial Britain's favorite bar soap. Yellow, lard-based, vaguely medicinal, and strong enough to double as wartime disinfectant. It's harsh on the skin and even harsher on the nose. Most people use it sparingly, and that's assuming they use it at all. The average citizen here bathes once a week if they're lucky, less if they're honest, and the water is usually shared among family members in descending order of social usefulness. You may be first this week, but don't get too comfortable. That just means the pressure's on for next time. Your skin, always slightly damp, takes on a strange texture, half wax, half sandpaper. Your hair doesn't so much flow as it clumps, carefully parted and patted into submission with pomade, coal tar, or if you're very fancy, bear grease. Your scalp itches just thinking about it. But you adapt. Everyone adapts. Personal hygiene isn't a private affair. It's a public compromise. And for all its discomfort, there's a certain camaraderie in the collective grime. Everyone's dirty. Everyone smells vaguely of something boiling. Everyone is in this together. And that's comforting? Maybe not comforting. Familiar. You pass a horse-drawn cart loaded with sacks of potatoes and manure in equal measure, and a man walking beside it greets you with the tip of his soot-streaked hat. His face is sooty, but his mustache is impeccably curled, waxed into submission despite the odds. That's the thing. You start to notice the little efforts. A ribbon in the hair, a clean collar on a filthy coat, a woman carefully powdering her nose with crushed chalk in the reflection of a rain-streaked window. You can't fight the grime, not really, but you can carve out a few small victories. One lesser-known detail at a time. Some people rub vinegar into their skin after a long day outdoors, believing it to be cleansing. The result? You smell like a soggy pickle, but a somewhat sanitized one. As you step into a narrow side street, the shadows deepen and the walls press close. Someone's hanging laundry overhead, rows of stiff, graying shirts flapping gently in the breeze like flags of surrender. A cat darts across your path, and you realize that even the animals here seem a bit dirtier than they should be. There's a layer of dust on everything. It's not the kind you wipe off, it's the kind you accept, incorporate, and eventually forget is there at all. Dirt isn't just on things, it becomes part of things. Part of you. The weirdest thing? You're kind of getting used to it. The sights, the smells, the ever-present fog curling at your ankles like a bored ghost. You find yourself appreciating the warmth of your body in the cold air, even if it comes with a layer of sweat and city soot. You pause for a moment to rest against a lamppost, the iron cold against your back, and you take a slow, smoky breath. It's terrible, yes, but it's your terrible. And in this dirty, grimy, foggy little slice of history that somehow makes it okay, you shuffle slowly through the misty morning air, boots still damp from yesterday's slush, toward a brick building exhaling long, steady plumes of steam from rusted vents near its foundation. Your destination. The public washhouse, the industrial city's awkward solution to the pressing issue of collective human odor. The door groans as you open it, heavy with moisture and swelling from years of steam damage, and you step inside, immediately enveloped in a moist warmth that clings to your face like a needy towel. The scent is unmistakable, a damp cocktail of wet socks, old soap, stale sweat, boiled flannel, and just the faintest tang of mildew. It's not so much unpleasant as it is pervasive, the kind of smell that lingers in your nostrils and then follows you home like a stray dog. Inside, the air wobbles with heat, thick and heavy, and visibility drops. Steam curls around the tiled pillars, fogging up the window panes and softening the outlines of half-dressed strangers moving through their weekly ritual like ghosts in a communal sauna. You find your footing on slick stone tiles, every surface faintly wet, like the room itself is perpetually sweating. The washhouse hums with a quiet symphony of splashing water, soft grunts, squeaking basins, and the occasional cough, punctuated by the steady hiss of taps too old to turn off completely. You spot a row of open stalls, each equipped with a chipped basin and a leaky spigot, where people scrub at their bodies with the focus of monks and the privacy of goldfish. There's no curtain, no pretense, just pale limbs and wet underthings and the silent agreement that nobody's really looking at each other, even when they obviously are. You select your basin, one blessedly unoccupied, and begin the process of washing in public while pretending you're alone, which is a special sort of performance art they don't teach in drama school. The water comes out lukewarm at best and smells faintly of iron and municipal regret. You dip a cracked soap bar into your basin. It's industrial carbolic, dark red, and rough enough to double as a weapon if you're feeling spicy. It lathers poorly but smells medicinal, a chemical reassurance that you're at least trying to be clean. Around you, bodies move methodically, shirts are peeled off and wrung out, arms are scrubbed red, and scalps are attacked with fierce determination and shared combs. An old man 2 basins down lets out a long, theatrical sigh as he splashes water on his face, his expression hovering somewhere between despair and mild relief. Across from you, a woman calmly picks lint off her chemise with the practiced detachment of someone who gave up on modesty a long time ago. You try not to stare, but you're only human. The steam clings to your lashes, and your clothes hang from hooks nearby, slowly absorbing more moisture than they'll shed. Someone's child squeals nearby. Whether from joy or accidental soap in the eye remains unclear, and the sound echoes against the tiled walls, briefly reminding everyone that this is supposed to be a public service and not some Dickensian fever dream. There's a small room off to the side where laundry is being boiled in cauldrons the size of bathtubs, tended by a woman with arms like tree trunks and an apron stained the color of hard water. She stirs the bubbling linen with a wooden pole longer than she is tall, her movements hypnotic, rhythmic, and vaguely threatening. You wonder, briefly, if she's part of the building or just a permanent fixture, like a gargoyle assigned to watch over socks and underpants. The steam in here is so thick it becomes part of your lungs, and for a moment you feel like you're breathing through a woolen mitten. The air is wet, your skin is wet, your soul might be wet. Still, you keep scrubbing, because once you're here, you might as well commit. It's not just about physical cleanliness, of course. The wash house is one of the rare places where everyone pretends they're on equal footing. Even though, let's be honest, you can always tell who brought their own soap and who had to borrow the sad communal sliver that lives on the edge of the basin like a forgotten mushroom. There are quiet rituals here. People nod in acknowledgement when they pass, offer a corner of towel to a friend, or quietly swap gossip as they wring out their sleeves. The conversations are hushed, fragmented. A man whispers about a neighbor's lice outbreak. 2 women discuss a landlord who hasn't repaired the pipes. Someone mutters something about the rising price of candles. It's like a damn town square, except everyone's in their drawers and pretending not to notice how close their elbows are to someone else's thigh. Historians still debate just how effective these public washhouses were at improving hygiene for the working classes, especially when most people only used them once a week or less, and personal items were often reused, reworn, and barely rinsed. But one thing's certain, the washhouse was more than just a place to rinse the cold dust off your skin. It was where people reminded themselves they were still human, still worthy of care. Even if that care came from a rusty tap and a bar of soap that doubled as exfoliation and existential punishment. You spot a mother gently scrubbing her daughter's feet, humming softly through clenched teeth, and something about the tenderness in that small act makes the entire room seem a little softer, despite the noise and the smell and the dripping walls. A lesser-known fact? Some washhouses, especially the newer ones built in the late 19th century, included reading rooms and waiting areas where patrons could dry off while flipping through heavily thumbed periodicals that mostly featured advertisements for products promising to make you cleaner, whiter, or less of a general embarrassment to society. You see a sign near the entrance warning patrons to keep the noise down and soap off the floors, which feels optimistic at best. There's also a fee schedule posted nearby. Half a penny for a basin, a penny for a full bath, and threepence if you want a towel and to pretend, briefly, that you live in a hotel. You lather your arms again, mostly out of habit, and your fingers have gone pruny. The soap stings a bit where you nicked your knuckle earlier, and you wonder if the cut will get infected or just blend into the general background radiation of 19th century health hazards. You don't linger. No one really does. Once you've done your due diligence with the soap, you rinse off with cold water from a metal pitcher that's seen better centuries, and reach for your towel, which now feels damper than you are. Still, it's warmer than the air outside. You dry yourself as best you can, wrap yourself in slightly moist layers, and try not to think about how much of the city's steam is made of other people's bathwater. Before leaving, you pass a mirror hanging crookedly near the door, fogged, streaked, and cracked in one corner. Your reflection stares back at you, cleaner, maybe, but somehow wearier. Your cheeks are pink from scrubbing, your hair damp and wild, and there's a faint line of soap residue near your jaw. You wipe it away with your sleeve, leaving a smear of lint in its place. Good enough. You nod once at your ghostly reflection, then step back out into the street, where the cold air hits your skin like a sarcastic slap. The warmth of the wash house vanishes almost immediately, but you carry a little of it with you. The faint scent of carbolic, the lingering sting of cleanliness, the echo of shared silence. And maybe, just maybe, a little less grime than before. You trudge home through the misty slop of the cobblestone streets, cheeks still tender from your public scrubbing, knowing full well that the next round of personal cleanliness involves considerably more effort and considerably less dignity. The weekly ritual of the tin bath. You arrive at your lodging, a narrow, leaning house wedged between two others like a book on an overcrowded shelf, and step into the dim kitchen, where the hearth provides the only reliable heat in the entire structure and smells vaguely of scorched bread and damp wool. It's bath night, which means everything else is postponed. Supper, relaxation, and personal boundaries. The tin tub, dented from use and slightly uneven on one side, is hauled in from its usual hiding place behind the pantry, its metallic surface cold enough to make your hands recoil. The bath itself looks like something meant for cooling pig lard or soaking laundry, not human comfort. And as you sit on the stone floor before the fire, it gives a hollow, echoing thunk that signals the beginning of a long, damp affair. Bathing in industrial Britain isn't a serene escape or a luxurious soak. It's a logistical operation requiring at least 3 kettles, a strong back, and a stubborn disregard for splinters and modesty. You begin heating the water in shifts, one blackened kettle after another balanced over the flames, each taking what feels like an entire rain to come to a boil. The first few splashes of hot water into the tub create a bit of steam and a satisfying clang, and for a brief moment, the promise of warmth feels real. But you know how this goes. By the time the tub is full enough to matter, the early water will be tepid, and the metal will have sucked up most of the heat like a greedy goblin. You toss in a pail of cold water to temper it. Then test it with your fingertips, lukewarm at best, but you've bathed in worse. You strip down next to the hearth, teeth chattering not from modesty, but from anticipation, because there's no warm bathroom to run to, no tiled floor or scented candles. Just the exposed bricks of the kitchen and the sound of someone coughing in the next room. You slide one leg into the tub, immediately bumping your knee against the side, then contort yourself into a position that resembles more of a polite fold than a seated pose. The tin bath is narrow, shallow, and entirely unsuited for adult human anatomy. Your knees poke out, your back curves like a question mark, and if you drop the soap, There's no chance of retrieving it without flashing every god in the pantheon. The bathwater sloshes with every movement, and the sound of your own splashing echoes slightly off the kitchen walls, a gentle reminder that any illusion of privacy is, as always, just that, an illusion. The warmth is fleeting, the comfort minimal, and yet there's something undeniably ritualistic about it. You scoop water over your shoulders with a chipped enamel cup, the heat relaxing your neck for all of 3 seconds before the cold air of the room creeps back in and reminds you who's in charge. You lather up with carbolic soap again, the same kind from the wash house, and it smells just as assertive in here, sharp, clinical, and slightly burned. Scrubbing under your arms feels like you're scouring a particularly stubborn pot, and every so often, the metal tub groans beneath you as if also disapproving of your hygiene choices. A small puddle forms on the floor beside you where the water leaks from a tiny rust hole near the base, but you ignore it. Everyone ignores it. The tub has character, and anyway, the floor was never dry to begin with. Across the room, your damp clothing hangs from a string above the hearth, steaming gently, and the heat from the fire makes the skin on your shins feel oddly tight while the rest of you shivers. There's a bizarre choreography to this whole affair. Reaching awkwardly for the rag without tipping the tub, pouring water behind your ears without flooding the kitchen, trying to rinse your hair with a tin jug while not knocking over the kettle perched on the hearth's edge. You think of the upstairs bedroom, unheated and frigid, and for a moment, you don't even mind the heat clinging to the kitchen walls. This at least is a controlled kind of discomfort. You hear a floorboard creak upstairs and remember that the walls are thin, the house is crowded, and bath night is often a family affair. One after another, from oldest to youngest, everyone's sharing the same bathwater unless someone has a cold, in which case they might just get a damp rag and a stern look. You happen to be first this time, which is either a privilege or a trap, depending on whether you're also expected to carry the bathwater out afterward. Your toes begin to wrinkle as you scrub your legs, and you spot a small, faded bruise on your thigh, probably from banging into something sharp during the week. You've become so used to incidental pain that you almost didn't notice. The water is now cooler than your skin, and little ripples of goose flesh spread up your arms. You know the routine. It's nearly time to get out, dry off, and dump the water before someone else takes your place. As you lift 1 foot out of the tub and place it on the kitchen towel, laid down as a mat, you feel the chill of the room rush in to claim your freshly steamed body like a tax. You stand quickly, avoiding eye contact with the pantry door where someone might be waiting, and grab a towel so thin and stiff it might actually qualify as a napkin. You dry yourself in quick, efficient motions, careful not to drip too much onto the already slick floor, and shiver despite the nearness of the fire. One of the enduring mysteries historians like to bicker over is just how often the average person truly bathed like this. The romantic estimate is once a week. The more practical reality? Sometimes once a fortnight, or even less, depending on water access, labor demands, and how many family members needed the same tub. What's clear is that the bath was more symbol than solution, more about appearing clean to others than actually reaching a modern standard of hygiene. A lesser-known detail: in some homes, instead of dragging out the tin tub every week, people use sponge baths with warm water in a basin, or just rub themselves with vinegar or scented cloths. And in tight quarters, a full-body wash might have been reserved for holidays or when guests were expected. Cleanliness wasn't a virtue so much as a balancing act between shame, effort, and the strength of one's nose. Your skin now smells faintly metallic and slightly medicinal, like a freshly cleaned surgical tool. And as you pull on your undergarments, still warm from the hearth, you feel a strange mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. The bath has drained you in more ways than one, but you're cleaner now, even if only temporarily. You dump the water out the back door, watching it steam in the cold air as it flows into the alley gutter and joins the rest of the city's discarded moisture. The tub is leaned against the wall again, still dripping, and you mop up what you can with a cloth that feels suspiciously like someone's old shirt. As the next person begins heating their kettle, you settle near the fire in your socks and try to enjoy the fleeting warmth, your body still steaming faintly like a roast on Sunday. The window glass trembles slightly with the outside wind, and your breath comes out in pale wisps, reminding you that comfort, like cleanliness, is always temporary here. But for now, your body feels just light enough to relax, your limbs loose, your skin scrubbed raw but somehow grateful. You survived the tin bath. You emerged mostly intact, and in a place where even the air feels slightly grimy. That's no small thing. You awaken the next morning with the faint ache of tin bath yoga still pulsing through your spine, and a dull awareness that, despite the cleansing efforts of the night before, you still don't smell quite right. Less filthy human chimney, and more freshly scrubbed furniture polish. It's not your fault, it's the soap. Soap in industrial Britain isn't the sweetly scented, pH-balanced, lavender-kissed marvel you might know today. It's more of an aggressive, opinionated slab of cleansing conviction, the kind that demands your loyalty and several layers of your skin. You sit by the hearth holding a freshly unwrapped bar, stiff and blocky, with an unwelcoming brownish-red hue, like dry brick dust or an angry liver. It's made of carbolic acid, phenol, technically derived from coal tar, and while it proudly boasts antiseptic properties, it also smells like someone's attempt to make medicine out of burnt tires. This is the era's pride and joy. The soap that could, in theory, cure a rash, treat lice, sterilize a knife wound, and remove both dirt and any lingering hope of ever having soft skin again. You rub your thumb along its surface and feel how dry and gritty it is, a bit like running your fingers across a scouring pad dipped in mystery. When it foams, and that's a generous term, it does so reluctantly, creating thin, coppery suds that vanish almost immediately, as though even the bubbles know better than to linger. You scrub with it anyway, because what choice do you have? It bites into your skin like a jealous ex, and leaves a lingering chemical tang that settles into your pores like a long-term tenant. The sensation is less refreshing cleanse and more forced penance. You half expect your palms to peel. But this was the goal, really, to feel scoured, to emerge from washing slightly redder, slightly rawer, and with the smug knowledge that you are, at the very least, not the dirtiest person on the tram today. Carbolic soap was widely used in workhouses, hospitals, and military barracks. It was cheap, powerful, and completely indifferent to your feelings. Even Queen Victoria approved of it, which says a lot about the priorities of the time. Historians agree on its medical benefits. It helped prevent infections, deter lice, and generally made everything around it smell a little more like burning. But they also note that using it daily was probably not advisable for anyone with skin attached to their body. You sniff the bar again and wince. There it is, the sharp, acrid edge that sits somewhere between creosote and vinegar-soaked leather. It doesn't get better with time. The smell lingers on your hands, your clothes, your bed sheets, your memories. And yet, people swore by it. Some swore at it, but mostly they swore by it. It became a symbol of industrial efficiency, functional, unpretentious, merciless. But carbolic wasn't the only option, of course. There were soaps for the well-to-do as well, nestled in ornate tins and smelling faintly of violets, almonds, or sandalwood, if you were lucky and rich. These were mostly decorative, crumbling under pressure and melting into sad, perfumed puddles if left unattended. You remember catching a whiff of one in a shop once, a soft, floral scent completely out of place amid the stench of coal dust and boiled cabbage, and thinking it smelled more like fiction than hygiene. For most people, though, the options were limited. Hard yellow soap, made from tallow and soda ash, was a kitchen staple used for dishes, laundry, and, when desperation struck, your own body. It didn't lather. It didn't ask questions. It simply removed whatever you had on your skin, including your will to live. Then there were the homemade varieties, Lye soap brewed in backyard kettles with animal fat and ash, cooled into rough blocks that could be used for washing clothes or clearing sinuses. These weren't crafted with scent or softness in mind. They were survival tools, capable of cleaning a cow or scrubbing a child, depending on what the day called for. And they came with risks. Too much lye, and you'd end up with a chemical burn. Too little, and the soap wouldn't do anything except disappoint everyone involved. The perfect batch was a point of pride, and even then, it was still just mildly abrasive sludge with dreams of cleanliness. There's an odd ritualistic quality to this whole process. You begin to appreciate the consistency of it, even if the consistency is somewhere between a brick and a regret. You scrub with a focus that feels almost devotional, rubbing your elbows raw and convincing yourself it means you're somehow better than the version of you who hadn't yet exfoliated their dignity off. One lesser-known detail: some Victorian households, especially in cities, used grated soap mixed with water to stretch their supply, turning their bars into sludgy paste stored in jars and rationed out like wartime marmalade. You consider this as you eye your dwindling bar, now slick with use and barely able to hold its shape. You make a mental note to store it in a dry spot, lest it dissolve into a sad puddle of brown goo, which is a tragic end for something that cost you a precious halfpenny. The soap interacts differently depending on what you're washing. Your skin tolerates it poorly, your hair less so, and your laundry, well, your laundry never had a say. You remember laundry days as soap-scented endurance trials, where boiling water, elbow grease, and harsh soap collided in a spectacle of steam and red knuckles. There was no separating body soap from clothing soap or dishes soap. There was just soap, and you made it work. Your hair is still slightly crunchy from last week's wash, and your hands have taken on the unique feel of old paper, thin, dry, and disturbingly loud when rubbed together. There's something oddly satisfying about the roughness, though. It's proof of effort, proof you tried. Cleanliness in this era isn't about softness, it's about resilience. You look at the soap again, this time with something like respect. It's unpleasant, sure, but it works. Mostly. There's a sense of satisfaction in knowing that whatever bacteria you might have been harboring has either fled or surrendered. Even the fleas are scared of it. That's worth something. Still, you can't help but wonder, was there ever a better way? Did anyone in this era get to feel clean and comfortable? Historians still wonder how different cleanliness expectations were between classes. The upper crust, with their perfumed soaps and footmen to draw their baths, certainly had access to softer rituals. But for the average person, bathing and scrubbing was more combat than comfort, an exercise in bracing against the elements, the harsh tools of hygiene, and the quiet social pressure not to stink too badly in public. The idea of soap as a luxury was still very much alive, and you can't help but think how different things might have been if even the working poor had access to something a little less punishing. The fire pops softly beside you, and you place the damp soap bar on a dish made of cracked porcelain, watching it slowly reform its hardened edges as it dries. You wonder if your skin will ever quite adjust, if you'll ever stop smelling like a medic's locker. But there's also a strange sense of calm here, a rhythm to the discomfort, a routine carved out in harsh bars and warm water. In its own weird, industrial way, it starts to feel almost normal. You reach for your towel, still slightly damp, as always, and wipe your hands slowly, the scent of carbolic still clinging to your fingers like a ghost. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. You wake up stiff, half wrapped in a woolen blanket that's been matted into submission by years of use and the occasional moth nibble. And before your eyes even adjust to the gray morning light sneaking through the soot-streaked window pane, you become uncomfortably aware of your undergarments. Those persistent, scratchy companions that have not, it must be said, been changed in quite some time. They cling to your skin like judgment, stiff with body heat and last week's effort. Their seams etched into your waist and shoulders like poor architectural choices. Welcome to the sacred, grimy world of Victorian underthings, a realm in which airing out, Your small clothes on a sunny windowsill once a week is a celebrated hygiene strategy, and where the act of actually changing your underwear is often reserved for illness, holidays, or catastrophic events. These garments aren't the soft cotton of modern life. They are made of flannel, wool, or coarse linen, depending on how fancy or poor you are, and all of them seem uniquely engineered to itch in the exact places you can't politely scratch. Putting them on is a slow act of acceptance. Taking them off is a rare event, almost ceremonial, and sometimes requires assistance and two boiled kettles. Your drawers, an elegant term for what is essentially a long, baggy, flap-adorned prison for your legs, are more like armor than underwear. They reach nearly to your ankles and secure around your waist with a button that never sits comfortably. If you're a woman, your corset is waiting, too, lays tight to provide support, shape, and daily cardiovascular challenge. It creaks when you move and occasionally digs into your ribs, just enough to make breathing feel like an elective activity. And beneath it all, the chemise, the first layer and the last thing to see soap, usually made of rough linen and acting as a sacrificial sponge for everything your body emits or absorbs during the day. This is the piece that soaks up sweat, traps odors, and holds them close for days or even weeks at a time. You start your morning by tugging at the waistband of your drawers, wondering, as always, whether they've shrunk slightly in the damp or whether you've just lost the will to exist within them. Laundry in this world is a full-body experience, not a routine, and underthings deemed intimate and not for public display are often neglected the longest. Washing them means boiling water, scrubbing by hand, drying them discreetly, because heaven forbid a neighbor sees your bloomers on the line, and enduring several days without them while they hang in cold rooms refusing to dry. Which is why most people don't wash their underclothes regularly. They do what everyone else does. They air them. You hang them over the back of a chair in front of the fire. Let the heat bake the worst of the funk out, give them a sharp snap, and declare them fresh. It's more of a symbolic gesture than an actual cleansing. But in a society where hygiene is judged on effort more than effectiveness, the ritual matters. One lesser-known trick? Some people would sprinkle their drawers with vinegar or lavender water, not so much to kill germs, which weren't entirely understood yet, but to trick the nose into believing everything was fine. The result is that you now smell like a pickled flower, but that's still marginally better than the alternative. The undergarments themselves aren't tailored for comfort. They bunch, rub, chafe, and occasionally attempt to saw your limbs off at the joint. But they do provide warmth, and in a country where most homes are only marginally warmer than the outside air, that counts for something. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, feeling the unmistakable scratch of a seam against your thigh, and make a note to possibly rotate them later. Just flip front to back, inside out, and pretend it's innovation. Everyone does it. Historians still debate just how often the average Victorian changed their underclothes. Some records suggest once a week if you were lucky, once a month if you were realistic, and some accounts don't mention it at all, as if the whole topic was too delicate to acknowledge even in writing. What's certain is that hygiene was tied to status. If you were rich, you had maids to boil and scrub your things and a rotating stock of fresh linens. If you were poor, you had two options, or what you had into oblivion or forego under things entirely and call it natural living. Children were usually the most honest about it, running wild with loose shifts and no drawers, their parents reasoning that kids would just ruin anything clean within minutes anyway. Adults, however, had reputations to protect, and underclothing became a curious paradox. Always worn, rarely washed, occasionally discussed in whispers if someone fainted from the smell. The public expected you to wear proper undergarments at all times, but not to acknowledge them, like ghosts that haunted your body with the scent of last Tuesday. And God forbid your petticoat peeked out in public. It was seen as wildly indecent, a flash of textile that hinted too strongly at the terrifying fact that you, too, wore underwear. Privacy was important, which made cleanliness difficult. You couldn't just toss your bloomers onto the line in the alley. They were dried indoors behind screens, over fire guards, or under the bed, where they'd gather warmth, smoke, and the occasional house spider. You glance down and notice a small tear at the hem of your chemise. You sigh and make a mental note to mend it, eventually. Maybe. It's not going anywhere. The fabric has begun to pill in strange places, and there's a stiff patch near the shoulder that probably came from last week's attempt at spot cleaning with half a lemon and vague optimism. Still, you wear them again, because the alternative is to go without, and frankly, the thought of sitting through another day in rough wool without any barrier at all is more than your thighs can bear. You're aware, dimly, that you're not alone in this experience. Everyone around you smells vaguely of damp linen and old soap. It's a community effort. No one's especially fragrant, but no one's especially offensive either. You all exist in a kind of olfactory equilibrium, suspended in layers of wool, sweat, and social expectation. A passerby brushes past you on the narrow staircase, and you both pretend not to notice the telltale creak of unwashed drawers or the faint chemical sting of yesterday's vinegar rinse. You nod politely. They nod back. That's the dance. Underwear isn't about luxury or even preference. It's about endurance. A buffer between you and the world. A layer that catches the worst of the soot, the sweat, and the judgment. And while you might daydream of clean cotton and elastic waistbands, you also know deep down that no one here expects comfort. Just survival, scratchy seams and all. You shift in your chair, and your chemise bunches slightly under your arms. It's fine. You'll adjust. You always do. Night creeps over the narrow rooftops like a blanket laid down with more haste than care, and inside your dim, wheezing little room, you feel the familiar chill that means you'll soon be cocooned under scratchy layers of bedding. Everything slightly damp from either the fog outside or the breath of whoever last occupied the mattress. You've banked the fire low, snuffed the candle to a stub, and settled into the hard mattress. Your limbs finally still after a day of clattering footsteps and clattering thoughts. The room grows quiet except for the occasional pop from the hearth and the groaning sigh of wooden beams above. You close your eyes, breathing in through your nose, and there it is. That faintly sour, warm smell hovering just beneath the scent of wool and soot. You know what it is, and you try not to think about it too hard, but your feet brush up against the underside of the bed frame, and your toes graze cold porcelain. The chamber pot, always there, always waiting, your unglamorous nighttime companion, and the last thing between you and a very, very unpleasant midnight stumble down 4 flights of creaking stairs in the dark to reach a freezing backyard privy that may or may not already be full, locked, or occupied by something that hisses. You try to ignore it, pretend your bladder will behave, that you'll sleep straight through till morning like one of those serene creatures in paintings. But you know better. Everyone does. Eventually, it comes nature's subtle, slow crescendo. A growing unease. That dull pressure reminding you that tea, soup, and nervous pacing all have consequences. You shift, try to sleep through it, trying to will your kidneys into submission, but no. It's happening. You sigh and surrender, push the covers off like peeling yourself out of damp laundry, and reach beneath the bed. Your fingers find the curved lip of the pot, cool and slightly sticky, as though it resents being disturbed. You pull it out into the open, and it clinks softly against the floor. The room doesn't get any brighter. Your candle's long out, and you're navigating by moonlight and muscle memory now. You awkwardly maneuver your nightshirt, knees creaking like the floorboards beneath you, and position yourself above the pot with the precision of someone who's done this far too often and still fears a catastrophic misalignment. There's always a little moment of humility here, balancing over a glorified bowl in your own bedroom, squatting like some confused chicken, praying that nobody walks in, even though the door's locked and the whole house is asleep. The act itself is anticlimactic. A bit of trickle, the faint sound of warm liquid hitting cool porcelain. An exhale, then silence. You sit there for a moment longer than necessary, letting your eyes adjust to the dark, letting your pride reassemble itself, then wipe with a rough scrap of rag you keep folded by the bed for this very purpose. Not exactly the embroidered handkerchiefs of aristocratic fantasy, but this isn't a Jane Austen novel, and you're not wearing lace. You lift the pot and slide it gently back beneath the bed, careful not to spill or bang it too loudly. You'll deal with it in the morning, like always. That's when the chamber pot becomes less a useful tool and more a morning hazard. With the contents cool, the smell sharpens. Morning sun creeping and doesn't purify, it illuminates. And soon enough, your nostrils will catch that unmistakable scent again, but colder this time, more judgmental. No one talks about chamber pot etiquette, but everyone follows it. Empty it first thing, don't ask what anyone else's contains, and for the love of all things unholy, never, ever leave it full past breakfast. One lesser-known fact: some chamber pots came with lids, ornate little covers that tried, desperately, to preserve a shred of dignity in what was ultimately a bowl for bodily fluids. Others were built into commodes, chairs with hidden compartments beneath a cushioned seat, so you could relieve yourself with the illusion of grace. You don't have one of those. You have the basic kind, plain, ceramic, chipped at the rim. It was probably passed down from someone who didn't want to carry it when they moved, and now it's yours. Historians still argue over whether people actually cleaned their pots daily or just added a splash of lye or vinegar and hope for the best. The answer, as always, depends on class, climate, and tolerance. Some people line theirs with straw or paper. Others simply let it fester until they couldn't ignore it anymore. You try to rinse yours in the shared washhouse basin with a touch of shame and a glance over your shoulder. The problem is that you're not the only one in the house. Everyone has a pot. Everyone uses it. And come morning, when the clatter of boots and the groan of early risers begins, there's a quiet parade of chamber pots being discreetly emptied out windows, down the alleyway drain, or, if the night chill was too cruel, dumped straight into the hearth ashes with a grimace and a prayer. There are stories, of course, of people too lazy or too sick to get rid of theirs, letting them sit until flies gather and mold forms. Of pots mistaken for soup tureens by visiting in-laws. Of small children knocking them over mid-tantrum. And the infamous tale of one landlord who used to inspect the pots of his tenants to make sure they weren't wasting space with excess. You don't know if that last one's true, but it haunts you anyway. The chamber pot is the kind of object you learn to live with, like a limp or a persistent relative. It's both intimate and public. You don't speak of it, but it's always there, lurking just out of sight. It knows your schedule better than you do. And every time you lift it, you're reminded that civilization is a thin veneer, and below that lies a very human truth. Everybody pees. Some just do it with more porcelain than others. And the thing about it is, it works. It may not be elegant. It may not be sanitary. But it saves you from that long, bitter walk through the courtyard, that stiff wind that cuts through your dressing gown like knives, that outhouse door that never quite closes all the way. It's ugly. It's embarrassing. It's essential. You finally drift back to sleep, warmed by your blanket and the not-so-distant memory of relief. The pot sits beneath your bed like a quiet sentinel, filled with your nocturnal regrets, waiting to be dealt with. The faintest scent wafts upward as you turn in your sleep, barely enough to notice. But it's there. It always is. Morning sunlight filters through the soot-smudged window, and as you stretch the night out of your limbs, you become acutely aware of an all-too-familiar discomfort: your teeth. Or rather, the constant dull throb where your teeth reside, aching quietly like little time bombs of neglect and bad luck. You sit up slowly, tongue probing the edges of molars that have felt slightly looser with every passing week. The Victorian mouth is not a place of beauty. It is a battlefield, a dark, humid cave of sugar residue, tobacco tar, and the occasional dead nerve, all managed with little more than stiff bristle brushes, dubious powders, or, if you're unlucky, a scrap of cloth and a fervent prayer. The concept of dental hygiene exists, yes, but it's about as consistent as your upstairs neighbor's cough. Some days you scrub with soot or chalk. Others, you gnaw on a willow twig or rinse with stale ale and call it innovation. Your breath tastes like whatever you last ate, plus a few things you'd rather not name, and the soreness in your jaw is starting to feel like a lifestyle. You reach for your tooth powder tin, pop the lid, and stare at its contents. A gritty, grayish paste made of charcoal, powdered cuttlefish bone, maybe some bicarbonate of soda if you're lucky. It smells vaguely minty, but only because someone once stored it next to a bag of dried herbs. You dab your brush, a wooden handle with bristles that seem more appropriate for scrubbing shoes, into the powder and begin a ritual. No foaming, no gentle massaging of gums. This is an act of friction and shame. The bristles scrape your teeth with all the tenderness of a carpenter sanding down a door frame, and your gums tingle unpleasantly with what you hope is blood and not nerve exposure. You spit into a cracked basin, watching the flecks of red swirl down like bad omens. You rinse with cold water, mostly out of habit, and your teeth feel not clean exactly, but momentarily less fuzzy. You count them with your tongue again. Still 20. Or is it 19 and a half? Hard to say. You make a mental note to avoid anything crunchy today, and possibly tomorrow. Most people in your situation, working class, limited funds, limited access to actual medical professionals, avoid the dentist like they avoid the plague. Mostly because the dentist is like the plague. Mysterious, expensive, and capable of leaving you in far worse shape than you started. Dental care in this era isn't so much about prevention as it is about crisis response. You don't go to the dentist unless something's already terribly wrong. An abscess, a broken tooth, a pain that makes your vision blur. At that point, you don't want treatment. You want removal. And removal is what you'll get, often from someone who barely qualifies as a dentist and may, in fact, moonlight as a barber or blacksmith. The tools are simple. Forceps, pliers, maybe a hook, definitely no anesthesia unless you count a bottle of gin and biting down on your own sleeve. An open question historians still debate. Did Victorian dentistry really hurt that much, or have modern accounts exaggerated it for dramatic effect? The answer lies somewhere between yes and please never find out. If you've ever seen a dentist chair from this period, you'll understand why people avoided them. High-backed, wood-framed, with barely a cushion and absolutely no mercy. You sit down, they tilt your head back, and then it's just you, a rusting metal implement, and someone's gloved hand inside your mouth. The procedure is loud. Cracks, pops, muffled groans, and swift. Ideally, if the tooth breaks during extraction, as it often does, they'll go digging. If the gum tears, you'll just pack it with cloth and hope for the best. Infections are common, so are fainting spells. There's no aftercare except perhaps salt water, a bandage, and some gentle weeping, which is why most people opt not to go at all. Instead, they keep chewing with their bad side, favoring soft foods, avoiding sweets if possible, though tea with sugar is addictive and everywhere, and praying their teeth hang on long enough to outlive them. A lesser-known dental workaround. Some people used urine as a tooth cleaning agent, not because it was pleasant, but because ammonia kills bacteria, and in an era before fluoride and floss, people were willing to get creative. You shudder at the thought and decide, firmly, to stick with charcoal and denial. Your aunt once had a toothache so bad she let the neighbor's son, an apprentice tanner, pull it out with a length of string and a slammed door. He missed. She bled on the wallpaper. You remember it vividly, mostly because no one ever cleaned the stain. It became part of the decor, like a cautionary tale in floral print. And yet, the alternative was letting the tooth rot out of her skull, which wasn't exactly rare. Blackened stumps, exposed nerves, even teeth falling out mid-conversation. These are all normal parts of life. Smiling becomes a risk. Eating apples becomes a sport. Kissing, if it happens, is done very gently. You pause to rub your jaw, feeling a twinge beneath the second molar, a throbbing that's new and not entirely ignorable. You wonder if you've reached that inevitable stage, decision time. See someone? Wait it out. Or perhaps the spoon trick. Heat a spoon in the fire until it's nearly glowing. Press it to the outside of your cheek near the ache, and hope the heat draws out the infection, or kills the nerve, or causes just enough distraction to make the original pain seem less offensive. It's not medicine, it's desperation. But desperation and dentistry go hand in hand in this era. Even the wealthy, with their porcelain dentures and gold fillings, often suffer silently beneath lace and cravat. Because there's no escaping bad teeth when the water's unfiltered, the bread's full of grit, and sugar is both a treat and a threat. False teeth, when you can afford them, are their own horror story. Made from ivory, bone, or, yes, sometimes real human teeth collected from corpses or sold by the poor. The so-called Waterloo teeth were especially popular. Teeth pulled from fallen soldiers and fitted into dentures for the living. You've never seen a pair, but you've heard they click when you chew, and that's reason enough to never look into it further. Instead, you plan your meals around what your teeth can handle. Soft eggs, stewed vegetables, bread soaked in tea. You avoid nuts, hard crusts, and anything that threatens to shatter the fragile architecture of your mouth. You speak carefully, never too loudly, lest a sharp breath brings back the ache. And above all, you do your best not to smile. Not because you're unhappy, though let's be honest, the weather alone is enough to sour a mood, but because a full smile exposes your secret, the uneven, yellowed, gappy truth of your teeth. In paintings and photographs of the era, you'll notice people rarely bare their teeth. It's not a sign of formality. It's a survival tactic. Mouths were messy, and everyone knew it. A closed mouth meant mystery, dignity, and fewer questions. You lean into the mirror, what little reflection there is, and press a fingertip against a particularly tender gum line. It doesn't bleed this time. That's progress, probably. You rinse again and pat your mouth dry with a corner of your chemise. You're not about to change anything. You're just trying to last. Another week, another month, as long as possible before something finally snaps. And when it does, you'll sit in that awful wooden chair, bite down on a leather strap, and let someone with too much confidence and not enough training go mining in your mouth. But not today. Today, you'll chew carefully, speak softly, and hope the pain waits until morning. That's what passes for dental care here. Grit, hope, and avoiding almonds at all costs. There's something alive on your head. Not metaphorically, not a dramatic flourish, but very literally. You feel it as you sit up slowly in your narrow bed, the wool blanket slouching off your shoulders as a faint itch blooms at the nape of your neck and blooms again at the crown, just behind your left ear. You resist the urge to scratch, but it's useless. Within seconds, your fingers are there, massaging your scalp with the kind of quiet desperation only someone intimately familiar with head guests can understand. Victorian hair care isn't just about styling. It's about survival. And this morning, your scalp feels like a battleground. You reach for your comb, a heavy, wide-toothed thing made of bone or blackened wood, already bracing for the sound it makes when it hits a tangle. It does not disappoint. You wince as it snags at a cluster of knots, dragging with the resistance of tiny, invisible enemies. You tug harder. Something moves. You pause. This is not the start you hoped for, but it's entirely on brand for a century where lice, dandruff, and coal dust scalp were practically household names. It's not even considered dirty, really. Lice are just part of the ambience. They visit, they stay, they bring their friends. Your hair, whether long or short, isn't washed regularly. Maybe once a week if you're diligent. Once a month if you're realistic. The water's cold, the soap's harsh, and your scalp remembers every insult. Instead, you brush it out. You pick up your stiff bristled brush, the kind that smells faintly of last month's soap and possibly shoe polish, and begin the ritual. 100 strokes, they say, not for beauty necessarily, but to move the grease from scalp to strand, to make the natural oils stretch all the way to the ends and give your hair that shiny, damp look that says, yes, I am technically still alive. And it does shine, though not always pleasantly. The soot in the air clings to it. The smell of last night's stew lingers. You sometimes catch a whiff of coal smoke from your own fringe. It's less of a hairstyle and more of a souvenir. The combing is the worst. It's where the truth comes out. You separate a lock, run the teeth through, and inspect the results. Sometimes just dust, a few strands of broken hair, the odd tiny flake. But other times there's movement, a flicker, a speck that wasn't there before and definitely doesn't intend to leave. Lice are, to put it mildly, ubiquitous. Entire industries exist to combat them. There are combs with tighter teeth, oils meant to suffocate them, coal tar soap that smells like a burnt chemistry set and stings like betrayal. Some swear by vinegar rinses. Others dust their scalps with flour or powdered sulfur. You've even heard of people sleeping with their heads wrapped in cloth soaked in kerosene. You don't do that, mostly because you like your eyebrows intact. Still, there's always a tin of something on your nightstand: grease, pomade, coal tar ointment. Something to smear across your scalp and hope it offends whatever's nesting there. One widely known truth: hair is a class signifier. The upper classes have staff for this sort of thing. Maids to wash, brush, oil, and style. Wigs, even, though those are mostly out of fashion now. Still, the wealthier you are, the more elaborate your head looks. Curls, pins, braids, maybe even scent sachets woven in to mask the underlying truth that everyone's hair is struggling. But down here, with the laborers, the servants, the shopkeepers, hair is functional. You keep it pinned, braided, covered with a cap or scarf. Not to be elegant, but to keep it out of your face and discourage squatters. Historians still debate whether men or women had it worse. Men, after all, rarely bothered with head coverings and often shared hats, making lice transmission alarmingly efficient. Women, on the other hand, had more hair to hide them in. The bugs, not the men. Your scalp still itches. You give up pretending and start scratching in earnest, nails digging into dry patches like a dog on a mission. It feels good in the worst way. You glance toward the tiny looking glass nailed beside the hearth, and for a moment, you meet your own gaze, tired, wild-haired, and vaguely haunted. You look like someone who hasn't had a peaceful scalp in years. You haven't. Another lesser-known trick people use: lard. They slather it on like a protective balm, both to coat the hair and trap the lice. Of course, it melts with heat and smells like yesterday's bacon fat. But that's just one more layer on top of everything else you carry. Some days, it feels like your hair is wearing you. The comb returns, and you section your hair again, this time holding a towel beneath to catch anything that might fall. It's not a glamorous process, but it's necessary. The sensation of something crawling down your neck is always worse than the effort it takes to prevent it. And while you can't see what's still lurking in there, you can feel it. The way your skin tingles, the way your patience thins. You reach for the coal, tar ointment, twist the lid, and immediately regret it. The smell is overpowering, thick and chemical, like burnt rubber mixed with pine sap. You dip your fingers in and begin massaging it into your scalp. It tingles at first, then burns, then cools. You've done this before, and you'll do it again. It's the closest thing you have to cleanse. The lard keeps your scalp pliable. The tar kills most things. The comb clears the wreckage. You wonder, briefly, what modern people might think of all this. Probably that you're a walking chimney with fleas. Which, to be fair, isn't inaccurate. Children are hit the worst. Their scalps are smaller, their patience shorter, their understanding of shame non-existent. Entire schoolyards full of lice-ridden heads bumping into each other like little plague factories. You remember being one of them. The shame of the knit comb, the the sour vinegar rinse, the cold towel held against your ear to muffle the sting, your mother muttering to herself while she worked her way through each tangle like she was demining your hair. Now, you do the same to yourself, or your sister, or your child, if you have one. It's generational warfare, a routine passed down like recipes, except instead of bread, it's pest removal. You finish your routine by tying your hair back, tight, simple, no frills. You smooth the top, pat the sides, and check once more for movement. None today. That's a win. You wrap a scarf around your head, tuck the ends behind your ears, and feel the fabric press against your temples like a soft kind of armor. You're ready to go outside. Not clean exactly, but managed, stable. You've built a routine of control in a world where control is hard to come by. And honestly, that's enough. The lice will probably be back. The dandruff will never leave. Your scalp will always itch, and your comb will always bring back more than you'd like. But you'll handle it. One coal, tar smear at a time. You walk down a crowded street with your scarf tugged just a little higher than usual. Not because it's especially cold, though of course it is, but because the air carries with it the pungent bouquet of thousands of humans all collectively doing their best to ignore what they smell like. The mingling aromas of sweat, coal smoke, horse dung, unwashed wool, cabbage soup, and last Tuesday's laundry swirl together in a nose-wrinkling haze. You press your gloved fingers to your upper lip, hoping to filter the air slightly through the lavender sachet stitched into the fabric. One of those tiny social graces meant not so much for actual hygiene as for the great Victorian tradition of politely pretending things are better than they are. Welcome to the world of perfumed self-deception, where a dab of rose oil or a spritz of violet water stands bravely against the overwhelming evidence that humans, especially ones who wear 17 layers of unwashed clothing, are inherently pungent. Perfume is less a beauty tool and more a battle strategy. It doesn't enhance, it disguises. It doesn't invite closeness. It buys you just enough social distance to avoid immediate offense. The truth is no one wears deodorant. It's not that people forgot. It's that they never had it to begin with. Your armpits are raw from friction and full of potential, and your only options to deal with the smell are aggressive washing. Unlikely, given your limited bath access, or generous, almost religious application of perfume, or cologne, or vinegar, or spirits of ammonia, or for the bold, crushed herbs and lyso cloths tucked into your sleeves. You've done them all. Today it's lavender water, more accessible than rose, less cloying than jasmine, and you've applied it liberally to your neck, wrists, and yes, to the inside of your hat band, where sweat collects in quiet rebellion. You carry a handkerchief in your pocket, not just for decorum or nose blowing, but because it's your portable sanctuary. A few drops of scent soaked into the corner mean that in the worst moments, like passing a butcher's alley or standing too close to someone who clearly hasn't changed their chemise since Easter, you can discreetly raise it to your nose and retreat into a pocket-sized world that smells like flowers and fantasy. You wander through the market, and the power of denial is everywhere. The woman selling soaps looks pristine, but her soaps are so heavily perfumed that you suspect they're trying to compensate for something darker. Perhaps the knowledge that most customers will never use them properly. Next to her, a man in a patched waistcoat hawks little tins of solid scent. Wax bases loaded with oil and crushed flowers, meant to be dabbed behind the ears or inside gloves. You own one. It smells vaguely of bergamot and desperation. Gloves, in fact, are part of the olfactory arms race. The wealthier classes have theirs scented by design, leather soaked in oils so that every gesture releases a ghost of something pleasant. You've tried it once, bought a second-hand pair from a woman who claimed they were French. They weren't, but they did smell like dried oranges for a whole week before collapsing into their original identity. Musty old skin. Still, the memory lingers. There's a power to scent, a power to trick your senses into believing everything is refined when you're standing next to someone who smells like boiled onions and body regret. One well-known fact, Victorians believed bad smells could spread disease. The miasma theory, the idea that foul air itself caused illness, meant people took scent very seriously. Hospitals were doused in vinegar. Streets were swept and sprinkled with lime or carbolic acid. Parlors featured bowls of potpourri and vinegar-soaked sponges disguised as decor. People stuffed their pockets with scented sachets and carried pomanders, tiny metal orbs filled with herbs and spices, on chains like medieval mace. And for the well-heeled, perfume wasn't just a luxury. It was a shield. You pass a gentleman in a silk cravat who leaves a trail of ambergris and sandalwood in his wake. An olfactory power move that almost makes you forgive the fact that his boots are clearly crusted with stable residue. It's a game of layers. Layer enough nice smells over the bad, and maybe you won't notice that you haven't properly scrubbed your armpits since the last lunar cycle. A lesser-known detail: some households would scent their coal. Not the coal itself, but rather sprinkle scented salts into the fireplace so that, as the fire burned, the air was filled with floral or citrus notes. It didn't last, of course. The scent would be gone within minutes, buried under the usual bitter tang of smoke and ash. But for a moment, it felt civilized. You once saw a friend try something similar by tossing dried rosemary onto a stove burner. It worked for about 10 seconds, then set her apron on fire. You helped put it out, and afterward you both agreed it had been worth it. There's a kind of rebellion in trying to smell nice here. It's not about vanity. It's about hope. A whiff of lilac on the wrist says, yes, I know what I'm up against, but I still choose elegance. Historians still debate how much of this was truly effective. Did perfume actually make life more bearable, or was it simply a social performance? A way of saying, I am trying in a world where so many had already given up? The answer probably lies somewhere between. Perfume rarely conquered odor, but it gave people a sense of control, of dignity, of softness in a time of hard surfaces and harder expectations. You can smell the layers on people, the floral top notes, the spiced heart, and beneath it all, the base, wool, fatigue, and suppressed sweat. You pass a bakery and briefly think someone smells like cinnamon, before realizing it's just your brain grabbing at comfort. That's the thing about scent. It's emotional. It's memory. It's manipulation. You could be miserable, itchy, exhausted, but if your scarf smells like lavender and your gloves whisper citrus every time you move your hands, you can almost pretend you're better off than you are. You stop by a chemist stall and scan the bottles. Floral waters, essential oils, something called toilet vinegar that promises purity and complexion benefits. You unscrew a lid and take a sniff. It's sharp, herbal, astringent enough to make your eyes water. But you smile anyway. It's better than what's out here. You buy a tiny vial with your last bit of coin, not because you need it, but because you need what it represents. You dab a little onto your collar and immediately feel 20% more composed. You walk on. The city doesn't smell any different. The people haven't changed, but you have. You've added one more layer, one more line of defense. And as you round the corner and catch another deep, heady whiff of unwashed humanity, you lift your handkerchief to your face and breathe in the lie you've chosen. It's sweet. It's floral. It's not real. But for now, it's enough. It's early morning, and the fog outside is the kind that clings to your clothes before you even leave your doorstep. But none of that matters because today is laundry day, and you're already regretting your life choices. Your body aches in anticipation, as if every muscle knows what's coming. The hauling, the scrubbing, the endless wringing, the icy water that numbs your fingertips and stiffens your spine. You pull on your oldest dress, one that's permanently damp at the hem and carries the faint, sour smell of last week's soap. The air inside the washroom is thick with steam that clings to the ceiling like a wet ghost. You step into the haze and are immediately hit with a wall of smells: stale lye, wet linen, and that ever-present musk of hard water and harder labor. Around you, other women are already deep into it, sleeves rolled, brows damp, knuckles red and raw. No one speaks much. Laundry day is not for small talk. It's for battle. A weekly war waged against sweat, soot, and the stubborn judgment of unwashed sheets. And this is not a matter of casually tossing clothes into a machine and wandering off to make tea. This is all hands, all back, all endurance. The rhythm is brutal and familiar. Boil, scrub, wring, repeat. Your first stop is the copper boiler, an enormous, soot-blackened pot squatting over open flame, filled to the brim with linens and barely submerged shirts, bubbling like some domestic witch's cauldron. The steam rising off, it is suffocating, but you lean in anyway because you have to stir. Always stir, otherwise the bottom layers scorch and the smell lingers for days. You grip the long wooden paddle with both hands and churn slowly, deliberately. Your fingers are already puckering from the heat and humidity, and your face glistens with sweat that will, inevitably, be mistaken for clean. This boiling is supposed to kill the worst of it. Lice, bacteria, whatever unspoken horrors fester between the sheets after 6 nights of sleep and 1 feverish bout of the flu. It's oddly satisfying, watching the soap froth rise, watching the filth leach out into gray water like a confession. But the satisfaction is short-lived because next comes the real labor, scrubbing. You drag the laundry from the pot with iron tongs, 1 steaming bundle at a time, and carry it to the scrubbing station, a plank laid over a basin, and beside it, a corrugated metal washboard that looks more like an instrument of medieval punishment than a cleaning tool. You slather each item with harsh soap, actual chunks of lye-based soap that burns if left too long on the skin, and begin the violent ballet of pressing, scraping, and rinsing. Shirts, drawers, towels, petticoats, each one demands its turn. Your arms ache from the force of it, and yet the dirt clings stubbornly, as if it, too, doesn't want to be evicted. Sometimes you pause just to flex your fingers, which are already beginning to swell and crack from the mix of hot steam and cold water. You dip them into the rinse tub, a brutal contrast. Ice water that bites your joints like winter teeth. You swear under your breath. Everyone does. It's part of the rite. One widely known truth. Monday is wash day. It always has been, partly out of routine and partly because it takes that long to recover before the cycle begins again. You wash on Monday, dry on Tuesday if the weather holds, iron on Wednesday, and if you're lucky, the clothes make it back into rotation before anyone realizes you've been reusing the same chemise all week. You wring out each item by hand, twisting with every ounce of strength your shoulders can spare. The sheets are the worst. Heavy, stubborn, wide enough to slap you in the face if the wind catches them wrong. You and your neighbors drape them over ropes in the courtyard or hang them from windows like surrender flags. Of course, the weather rarely cooperates. Rain, fog, and freezing air make drying a Sisyphean chore. You've spent whole days drying shirts over chairs by the hearth, rotating them every hour like a roast. On unlucky days, they just smell like wet dog and soot when you're done. A lesser-known detail, some women urinate on laundry deliberately. Not for mischief, but for ammonia. Urine is chemically effective at breaking down organic stains, and it's not unheard of to save up chamber pots specifically for the laundry process. You don't do that. Not yet, but you understand the logic. When you're elbow deep in a stew of sweat, blood, coal dust, and grease, the idea of urine-soaked linens barely registers as extreme. Historians still debate just how widespread that practice really was, but in some circles, it's just another tool in the arsenal. Like using sand to scour out stubborn stains, or starching a blouse with boiling potatoes. The line between innovation and desperation blurs very quickly when your only alternative is shame. You look down at your apron, soaked through and speckled with brownish suds. There's a puddle by your feet that may or may not contain traces of every fluid imaginable. You don't care anymore. Your back is killing you, your knees have gone numb, and your fingers feel like they're trying to escape your hands. You switch to the rinsing basin, where every garment is plunged, squeezed, and plunged again. The water here starts clear and ends up looking like weak tea. You wring one shirt so tightly that you hear a seam give way. You sigh. Nothing to do but patch it later. Ironing will only make the damage more obvious, but wrinkled shirts raise eyebrows, and eyebrows raise gossip, and gossip, well, it's laundry day after all. Everyone's dirty laundry ends up aired in some form. You finish rinsing and begin hauling the heavy, dripping bundle of fabrics outside. It's not just heavy, it's demoralizing. Wet laundry triples in weight and drips cold down your legs as you stumble into the alley where ropes are strung across with sagging defiance. The sun has finally made an appearance, weak, reluctant, but better than fog, and you peg up each item with frozen fingers. The wind picks up. A petticoat slaps you across the face like it's angry about the washboard. You mutter an apology and keep hanging. And now, the waiting begins. Waiting for the wind to do its work. Waiting for the damp to recede. Waiting for your hands to stop aching and your lower back to stop sending out distress signals. One woman nearby is using a mangle, a giant crank machine that flattens clothes between rollers to squeeze out excess water. You eye it enviously. You once tried it and nearly lost a sleeve and possibly a finger. Still, you'd trade your soul for one right now. It's always the same. By the time everything's dry and folded and vaguely wearable, it's almost time to start thinking about next week's wash. The cycle is endless, the work thankless. And yet, there's something strangely satisfying about the way the clothes look afterward. Crisp in a way only hard-earned labor can deliver. Cleanliness might not be next to godliness here, but it's at least adjacent to survival. As you slump down on a stool, wiping your forehead with the one semi-dry rag you didn't wash, you let your gaze settle on the full clothesline, your little row of victories fluttering in the breeze like tired, damp soldiers. You know tomorrow you'll be ironing, and the next day patching holes. But for now, you've done it. You've endured. Your muscles are screaming, your nails are broken, and your skin feels like someone tried to sandpaper it off. But the sheets are white. The shirts are cleaner. And that's enough. You look down at your red, chapped hands and realize you can't feel your fingertips. You laugh softly, a little mad, a little triumphant. Laundry day is a nightmare, but somehow you're still standing in it. The street outside your building smells like a corpse that's given up and started fermenting in public, which, to be fair, might not be far from the truth. You step carefully, dodging puddles that are far too opaque for comfort, and wondering, not for the first time, if the city itself is slowly trying to digest you. Beneath your boots lies a nightmare cocktail of rainwater, rotting vegetable peelings, horse dung, chamber pot overflow, and the occasional mystery, slick too sinister to name. This is London, or Manchester, or Liverpool, or any other city swelled with industry and people, thick with the reek of unburied waste and optimism. You navigate the cobbled lane with your skirt lifted just enough to keep it from wicking up the street's offerings, but not high enough to be indecent. A delicate balance, like so much of Victorian life. The gutters, or open sewers as a more honest soul might call them, run along each side, sluggish and stinking, and always just one summer away from open rebellion. You breathe shallowly through your nose, though it hardly helps. The scent is in the air, in your clothes, in your very pores. And despite all this, the leading theory is still that the smell is what makes people sick, not the microscopic creatures swimming through the filth, multiplying with every splash and splatter. You pass a group of children playing beside a pile of refuse that includes a dead rat, a broken doll, and something that might once have been a boot. They're laughing. Filthy, but laughing. You wonder what armor children possess that lets them ignore the miasma while grown-ups choke on it. Nearby, a woman empties a slop bucket directly into the gutter with the weary precision of someone who's done it every day of her life. She nods at you as the contents swirl down the lane and disappear into the nearest drain. which you know feeds directly into the river. The same river where the laundry was done yesterday. The same river people drink from downstream. You pull your scarf tighter around your nose, a gesture as futile as perfume against a bonfire, and try not to step in anything that steams. And yet, for all this rot and muck, no one seems surprised. No one panics. Because this is normal. Expected. Just part of the city breathing through its many mouths. You reach a corner where the stench intensifies. A sewer grate nearby is belching occasional gurgles and wheezes like a sick dragon. You remember hearing once that the air under London is a labyrinth of brick tunnels and pipes. Some new, most ancient, designed to ferry away waste, but more often just hoarding it. The great stink of 1858 still echoes in local legend. A summer so foul that Parliament had to soak its curtains in chloride of lime just to keep meeting. You weren't alive then, but everyone older than you remembers it with a kind of smelly reverence, like survivors of a bad dream no one could wake up from. The River Thames turned into a bubbling, brown snake of death, and cholera danced through the slums like it had a key to every door. And yet, people believe the smell itself was the culprit. The miasma, foul air that poisoned lungs and broke bodies. Germ theory was a whisper, too new, too small to explain the vast, stomach-turning reality of life here. One well-known historical fact. It took decades for the idea of microbes to replace the miasma model in public health. Even as the great physician John Snow traced cholera outbreaks to contaminated water in the 1850s, the prevailing belief remained that disease floated in on bad smells, carried by fog and moral decay. The stink was the warning sign. So people responded by trying to mask it, scattering lime, burning tar, spraying perfume, wearing herbal sachets around their necks. You once saw a woman hold a pomander up to her face, so long she got lightheaded and fainted. Her collapse was blamed on the heat, but you saw the iron ball full of cloves and camphor roll across the floor and knew better. You pass an alley where a sewer pipe has burst, again, and the trickle of brown water spills out like a quiet accusation. No one blocks it off. No one cleans it up. It just adds to the general ambience. A lesser-known detail. The city hired night soil men to remove waste from cesspools, often under cover of darkness. These men, filthy, foul-smelling, and strangely essential, shoveled human waste by the ton into carts and carried it away to be dumped somewhere, hopefully out of smelling range. You saw one once, face covered in a rag, clothes permanently stained with something unidentifiable. He was whistling. You've never forgotten that tune. But even their work couldn't keep up with the tide. The population was exploding, and infrastructure simply couldn't compete. The flush toilet, that marvel of modern convenience, made everything worse at first. Flushing all that waste into sewers not designed to carry it away. Every improvement brought a new kind of chaos. Even now, as you step around another puddle that's suspiciously warm, you wonder how long this dance can last before the streets drown in their own secrets. Historians still wonder if people of the time truly couldn't smell the danger, or if denial was simply easier than panic. You lean against a lamppost for a moment, staring down the street. The smell isn't just in your nose. It's in your throat, your eyes, your bones. You taste it when you swallow. And yet, life continues. Children play. Bakers bake. Tailors stitch. The city lives in its own stench, like a person who's gone nose blind to their own sweat. You keep walking, stepping carefully over bricks slick with runoff, eyes scanning for dry patches. A car trundles by, the wheels spraying brownish mist as they hit a rut. You shield your face just in time, but not your coat. Another day, another stain. You make a mental note to hang it near the fire tonight. Maybe sprinkle some vinegar on it and pray. You pass a public fountain, ornate, decorative, meant to signal civic pride, and wonder how many people know it's fed from the same contaminated source as the homes nearby. A man drinks from it anyway, cupping his hands, slurping loudly. You look away. Some things are easier not to witness. Your boots squelch softly as you keep moving, and you feel the familiar resignation settle in. This is not a place you visit. It's a place you survive. The filth is just another layer, like soot on the windows or fog in the lungs. You think briefly of the country, cleaner air, clearer water, but that's not your life. Your life is here in the guts of the city, walking the thin line between disgust and desensitization. You duck into a shop for a moment of reprieve, blinking as your eyes adjust to the dim interior. The scent here is better, barely, but it's dry, and the floorboards don't squish underfoot. You nod to the shopkeeper, pretending to browse while your nostrils recover. A jar of peppermint lozenges catches your eye. You buy one. It's stale and chalky, but mercifully minty, and for a few glorious minutes, you can pretend the world doesn't smell like despair. And it's back outside, into the soup. A man hurries past, coughing hard into his sleeve. You wonder, not for the first time, if it's just a cough or something more sinister. It's always hard to tell here. Illness doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It seeps in, silent and wet, carried on boots and breath. As you near your building again, you catch a sudden breeze from the river, strong, sharp, and unforgettable. It hits you like a slap, rank, fishy, thick with every upstream sin. You gag involuntarily, eyes watering. It's worse than you remember, worse than yesterday. You press your hand to your face and quicken your step. Inside, the walls don't smell much better, but at least they're familiar. You kick off your boots, peel off your coat, and light a candle that's supposed to smell like cloves, but mostly smells like wax and ambition. You sit by the window, watching the street below as night falls and the stink settles in for another shift. Somewhere a dog howls. Somewhere else, someone retches. You breathe shallowly, like someone living inside a cautionary tale. And yet, you're still here, still breathing, still stepping over the puddles and dodging the splashes. You survived today's sewer ballet, and tomorrow you'll do again. Because the city may stink, but it's yours. And sometimes, in the quiet moments when the wind changes and the candle burns just right, you almost forget what's waiting outside. By the time you make it to the backyard privy, you've earned the pilgrimage. It's late, dark enough that the oil lamp's glow barely cuts through the gloom, and quiet enough that your boots crunching on gravel feels like blasphemy. The air is damp with fog and something less polite, but you're used to that by now. In fact, everything about this moment, the chill, the dimness, the faint breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and human memory, tells you that you've arrived at the edge of both privacy and patience. The privy waits, a squat little wooden box tucked at the back of the yard behind a curtain of old laundry and the faint, shadowy remnants of someone's attempt at a vegetable patch. It leans slightly to the left, as if it's just as tired as you are, and its door creaks in a way that feels less like a warning and more like an apology. You open it slowly, half expecting something to scurry out, but tonight the only occupants are a few fat spiders in the corners, watching like landlords. You step inside, close the latch behind you, and breathe. Not because it smells nice, God no, but because here, in this crooked cube of wood and slanted walls, you are finally alone. It's astonishing how comforting that is. In a world where privacy is a luxury, the privy becomes a sanctuary. The seat is wooden, worn smooth from decades of reluctant use. Cold, naturally, and questionably secure, but it holds your weight, which is more than can be said of some friendships. You settle in carefully, mindful of splinters, and take a moment to just sit. There's a small cutout moon in the door, more symbolic than functional, and through it, you see a sliver of cloudy sky. It's not glamorous. It's not even clean, but it's yours, at least for the next few minutes. You look around, the cobwebs glisten faintly in the lamplight. The floorboards creak if you shift too much, and the air, while pungent, carries a weird sort of familiarity. It smells like every secret, every digestive compromise, every story that starts with "you won't believe what happened to me last night." The walls are covered in graffiti, faint carvings, old initials, even what looks like a crude drawing of a man with an alarmed expression and very long legs. You smile. You wonder who he was, what he was thinking. If he, too, was just sitting here, freezing and relieved, looking for a sliver of peace between the madness of laundry, lice, and societal expectations. One widely accepted fact: Victorian privies were rarely indoors, especially among the working class. Indoor plumbing existed, but it belonged to the rich, the elite, the clean, and the distant. You, on the other hand, get the real deal would stink in the occasional mouse. Your privy is a simple pit latrine, a seat over a hole, with a box of ashes nearby for sprinkling. It's not glamorous, but it helps keep the smell down. Barely. You grab the ladle and toss in a scoop for good measure. The sound is almost poetic, like the universe sighing in solidarity. And here, amid the mildew and the wind whistling through the warped planks, you reflect. On your week, on your feet, which ache, on your knuckles, which are still pink from scrubbing, on the fact that every bit of comfort in this world must be clawed out from between discomforts. You lean back slightly, careful not to touch the wall, and listen. There's a distant dog barking, a cart rolling past, a child crying somewhere, and someone telling them to hush. But here, you're invisible. No one asks anything of you in the privy. No one judges. No one knocks, unless they're desperate. A lesser-known detail: some families decorated their privies. Not extravagantly, of course, but with scraps of fabric, old pictures, maybe a bit of lace nailed above the door. Yours is a calendar from 3 years ago and a bit of torn newspaper someone left for reading material. It's faded beyond legibility, but you pretend to read anyway, if only for the ritual. You trace the old dates with your finger. January 14th, a Tuesday. You wonder what you were doing that day. Probably the same thing you're doing now. Just try to survive, try to find peace in a box that smells like despair and faintly like pickled onions. You laugh under your breath. The sound is strange in here, honest. You realize that you haven't been this still all day. Not when boiling linens, not when chasing lice, not when dodging chamber pot splash or breathing through lavender-scented lies. Stillness is a kind of luxury too, and it only seems to happen when you're seated on a questionably stable plank of wood, contemplating your entire life. Historians still argue about whether people actually enjoyed their time in the privy, if that could be called enjoyment at all. Some suggest it was the only time many women were alone. Others point out that for men, the privy was a chance to escape chores, expectations, noise. And maybe that's true. You certainly don't look forward to it, but you don't dread it either. It's neutral ground. It's you and the darkness and your thoughts and a few very nosy spiders. It's a place to breathe, to wince, to hope no one knocks. You shift again, and the seat groans beneath you like an old man with secrets. You whisper a quiet thanks to the wood for holding you, for not collapsing into the pit mid-thought, and then start preparing to leave. Because as much as you want to linger in the sanctity of isolation, your legs are going numb, and the wind just found a new crack in the wall to whistle through. You stand slowly, stretch your back, and take one last look around. This ridiculous, crooked little shed is somehow one of the few things in your life that's reliably there. It may stink, it may lean, it may have a spider the size of your thumb tucked above the doorframe, but it's yours. You unlatch the door and step out into the night, the cold biting at your ankles, the sky above a soft wash of gray, and stars you can't quite see. You walk slowly back to your room, past the drying laundry, past the coal stack, past the boots waiting by the door. Your muscles ache, your breath fogs the air, and you realize you're deeply, almost embarrassingly grateful for the absurd little ritual that is the end-of-day privy visit. You climb into bed, finally, your body heavy, your mind quiet. And somewhere in the back of your brain, a small, ridiculous part of you thinks, thank God for wooden boxes. Now that the fire has gone soft in the grate and the city's distant clatter has hushed into a muffled hum, You pull the blanket up a little higher and let your head sink deeper into the pillow. The world around you has finally stilled. No more soap to scrub, no chamber pots to empty, no smells to brace against. Just you and the quiet and the steady rhythm of your breath as it begins to slow with each exhale. Your muscles, once tense from the day's endless labor, now feel heavy and warm, like they've been gently wrapped in wool. The aches begin to melt away as you imagine the candlelight dimming, flickering its last golden glow against the walls before giving way to the soft velvet of night. Even the spiders are asleep now, curled into their corners, dreaming of dust motes. Outside, the fog rolls in like a lullaby, softening the edges of the world. The rooftops blur, the chimneys sigh, and even the streets, once brimming with chaos and clatter, have fallen into a soot-laced slumber. You picture the city resting beneath a quiet sky, every window glowing faintly like stars on the ground. In this moment, there is nothing left to do. No linens to boil, no boots to dodge, no privies to visit. Just the slow, comforting pull of sleep, wrapping itself around you like a heavy quilt. Let the weight of the day slip away. Let the steam, the soot, the soap, the noise, all of it, drift off with the fog. You're safe here, still. And soon, very soon, you'll be asleep.